Stanton, editor of The Gambit, and this is the Get Down interview. And I am joined this week by Nate Cameron, who is a longtime friend of the newspaper and myself, and also quite a Renaissance man here in New Orleans.
That's right.
You do a lot of different things. You work with Nostrovos. You helped found Global Warming. Yeah. You do all kinds of things in this city, and I figured we'd sit down and cut it up a little bit and talk about what you do. So
thank you, man. Thank you, man. Appreciate you for having me, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate y'all for what y'all do. You already know, a big supporter, like you said. But yeah, I just try to do everything I do is at the core of trying to advocate for and just big up the musician and culture bearer community that we have here. That is, to me, bar none, like anything in the world.
Well, I think starting there. Let's start with global warming because it is. To me, as somebody who came up in the '80s listening to hip hop, it is reminiscent of some of the I guess we called it conscious hip hop kind of community from the '80s. You had these like crews of like multiple different artists that were together. They'd be on each other's records.
Yes.
But it also seems like global warming has taken it a little bit of a step further with like other things as well, doing like mutual aid, things like that. So talk a little bit about how it started and sort of what's going on with it.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I came out, so I'm 41, so I came up in an era where, like you said, the crew was kind of the approach to like hip hop. I was in the crew era. There was the Rough Riders, there was the Violator team that was in New York. There was the whole Def Jam team, but then here locally, like I also am of the era of No Limit, Cash Money, and even beyond those two, there's so many more that like people don't know. Take 4 Records with DJ Jubilee, the Psycho War with Mac and Rod Smooth, the Squad before Wayne. So there was all these different collectives, and I saw all these different examples of how these black artists, particularly hip hop artists, were like helping each other to big up, right? Because all these collectives had individually people that were phenomenally dope. So even going back to like the soul movement in Philadelphia with like The Roots and Jill Scott and Bilal and all these people being in Jasmine Sullivan, like a lot of people don't know like they all were a collective before they were individually big. And so like I was always inspired by like these movements of people helping each other to rise up, right? Because we would always hit this ceiling. I mean, what was essentially happening was that we were hitting a ceiling by ourselves of like events that we wanted to do, festivals we wanted to do. We were told, okay, well, you don't have as many monthly listeners on this DSP as we'd like, and ooh, your shows are really good, but you're right at the cusp. And we noticed that like a lot of us had been hearing the same thing, right? So it's like, all right, if we're all right on the cusp, why don't we just make a group and just this one conglomerate thing where we can now pool all of our analytics, all of our stats, and now we pull them all together. We're a group, and so now do we have what's needed? But then even deeper than that, it was really just about like I was at the time working full time with Tank and the Bangers. Shout out to my family there. Worked on a tour and production and management team with them for about 6 or 7 years when they first started, and so Pell was one of our openers. I met Pell then for one of the tours that we did. We just toured with Frida, and then we did a tour with Pell after. We got tight then, and we were just talking about one of these days after tour. I can remember we were in Denver, and one day after tour, it was just like, man, we just need to figure out how to use this moment in time that we have to pull up, younger independent artists. And what I mean by that is that, we just noticed that a lot of the thought leaders, a lot of the popular household names that were coming from this generation and coming from New Orleans were all about like pulling people up, like John Baptiste, PJ Morton, Tank. I mean, all of these people, Hasizzle, I mean, all these people that are buzzing were literally trying to figure out how they can help people to the next level, So it's like, okay, that's not always been the case. How do we seize the moment of these Grammy-winning, phenomenal artists who want to pull up the next scene? And so it's like, okay, let's make a project. This all started with a project. The first idea was, all right, Pell, we're going to do a series of projects where we take these influential, New Orleans leaders and musicians, and we center that person. We use their influence, their platform, but it's produced by nothing but New Orleans producers. It's engineered by everything behind the scenes is strictly New Orleans, just so we can prove to the industry and to other folks that we can do something of quality. We can do something that has a rollout. We can do something that can compete with anybody else. So the idea was just to start with Pell and with hip hop, and to eventually go on to PJ and Tank and John and focus on all these different areas, but highlight all these different people. But I mean, COVID happened right after we decided for this to happen. So right when 2 weeks after, tour ended. Tour got shut down. We ended that tour. We were about to start a tour with Galactic. I remember in Minnesota, we landed in Minnesota, and then we got the word we were about to get on the plane and go home because everything was shut down. And so the beauty of that was that I think that kind of put a sense of urgency on folks that would not have been there had that not have happened. Also, everybody was sitting their butts at home. This is 17 artists, 12 producers, probably like 8 different engineers. Like, these are all people who travel extensively, but everybody was sitting home. Everybody was kind of unsure. Everybody needed some kind of therapeutic outlet because we didn't know what the hell was going on, how long we were going to be there, are we going to be able to tour, how are we making money? Everybody was kind of anxious, so having something to work on also, I think, kind of helped folks. So, yeah, it was just about making a project, and that evolved into, hurricanes coming and people having needs and entities hitting us up knowing that we had access to artists being like, hey, can we donate some stuff? And we're like, okay, let's make this a thing. Let's start building some partnerships where that artists that are in need can come through us. Artists that are doing grants and don't know how to do grants, we started these COVID-friendly grant sessions. That was judgment-free grant sessions. Because I would always get hit up by my artist friends like, I want to apply for this grant, but I don't know what this word means, and that'll make me look stupid. I don't want to, it's intimidating, and some of those things are designed to be as such, right? That's another story, but
yeah, there's a lot of people. This actually, you mentioned this multiple times in kind of a way with the engineers, the producers, the rollout. There's a general sense, I think nationally, but definitely within the city that like. There isn't an industry here, right?
Yeah.
There is, but there isn't, right?
Right.
We're not like Nashville, right? Nope. Which does have its own like epicenter, and there are a lot of like very real reasons that go historical, like race obviously is a huge part of that. But you guys have been trying in a lot of ways to counteract that, not only amongst yourselves, but also with classes that you do for other people, like this grant thing.
Definitely.
What has been we need to talk a little bit about what is the status right now of the music industry in New Orleans? Where are we at right now?
I think, and it's funny you say that because I went to Tennessee State University in Belmont in Nashville, and so that's where I grew up. I left New Orleans. I went there. That's my first time living outside of my folks' homes. And so I was able to see, that was my inspiration because my mentor, shout out to Mr. Crawford, Mr. John Crawford. My mentor wrote two bars, of one of the group Alabama's most popular songs. So everybody knows anything about Alabama. They just recently got bumped off by Drake, but they had like the top selling album that was on like the Billboard chart for the longest time, right? So this guy writes 2 bars. He has a beautiful house. His mailbox check from that album is quite sufficient still now. And this is the album from like 83, and so that was my first time seeing and meeting and being befriended by somebody who'd kind of worked the industry in that way. You know what I'm saying? I was blessed to be around a lot of artists, hip hop, R&B here, even some of our greats. I mean, I won't call any names, but even some of our greats. And some of them just weren't treated like they were supposed to be. They did not get the respect financially that they should have gotten. And so, that was my first time going to Nashville. That was my first time meeting engineers that lived on the same block as the artists, managers, roadies, tour managers. They live in the same neighborhood as the artists, the same flat. They eat at the same places. And as I stuck around longer, I saw that sometimes their jobs were a little bit more sustainable than the artists. Artists, it depends on trends and it depends on different things, and it's so fickle. But these folks, their salary is locked in. So, so it's funny you mentioned Nashville because Nashville is really what kind of sparked my thing about, okay, why don't we learn more about the business in New Orleans? They always teach us to be in front of the camera, and we're great at it, and we need to have that. But Nashville was just very big on empowering all the behind the scenes stuff, and so that was one of my big things. Was like, let's show folks that there's a lot to do to put a record together. It's more than just the producer, more than just the artist. There's a lot of different things, and so like. Let's just introduce to folks that there are things, which is why we partnered with Trombone Shorty Foundation. This is year 3 of the cohort, and the music business cohort we started with them is essentially teaching 18 to 24-year-olds in New Orleans, predominantly black and brown kids, about all the different industries behind the scenes, right? From riggers to, New Orleans pressing plant, pressing it, all these different jobs that exist that, some of these communities are not introduced to. So that was the big push was for us to just at least put it in front of people. Like my dad would always say, you got to see it to be it. That sounded silly to me, and it just kind of rhymed when I was younger. But as I get older, it's like, well, shit, you have to know something exists to dream to be it.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. And it seems like, to me, it's fascinating that it never became a sustainable industry here because, I mean, you had like Alan Toussaint, you had Cosmos.
Yeah.
Like, the music was being produced and mixed and like done here. All of it was here. And then it kind of seemed to die. And like, and now it seems like over the last, I would say, just really since COVID, really, there has been, it feels like you guys have been making a strong push. And I feel like there's been some other folks as well doing their own independent kind of things, trying to reestablish it. But do you think that there's been any momentum towards that? Are we still in like the wilderness, so to speak?
No, I think there's been. I think it's been momentum. I think there's been momentum. We're now seeing, shout out to Frida, who's a good friend. We're now seeing the Fridas, the Hot Sizzles, being sampled multiple times on like hit #1 records, from Beyonce to Travis Scott to the City Girls, and we're seeing the business being done in a good way now. We're seeing these folks have control of their stuff. We're seeing these folks actually profit like they should off of some of the stuff. And so, like, I think it is definitely getting there. We're going in the right direction. Also, too, I think it's just also, I'll speak again too, like I said earlier, it's refreshing to see some of our leaders and bigger names want to be home. There's a lot to be said for, a PJ or a Tank to be home and to operate out of home and to build what they're doing from here and out of here. First, Pell, all these are folks who have the opportunity and have lived in other places. And, it could be probably easier in a lot of ways for them to live in LA or New York. But, the choice to build here and to like build out of here, I think is super important and super helpful to kind of what we're doing. So stuff is, I think it's progressing. Stuff is happening. I think the Super Bowl was a big push in the right direction.
You do.
I think as far as the music industry was concerned, I think a lot of execs came into town. A lot of folks came in. And a lot of folks were impressed by how far things had gone. We got stuff like MusicCon and these conferences that are building and coming. And so, I think it is definitely going in the right direction. We still got to push. There's still some stuff that we're slow on. We got to catch up on. But no, it's definitely further along than it was when I was younger, and I was like, I just need to go to Nashville to get any kind of infrastructure.
But even some of the folks in global warming, Sleazy and other people have decided, I gotta dip for at least a little while.
Yeah.
Well, it was just unfortunate, that they feel like they've got to go.
It is, and I wish that there were more. We're fighting for it. I wish there were more resource for that, right? I mean, that was a lot of the pull that you were talking about when C-Saint and when all those other labels kind of left out of here. Don Bartholomew, all those people who were like big time producing engineers from here, when they left out, it was more so Louis Armstrong. It was more so because they were incentivized to go to the Chicagos and the New Yorks and the LAs of the world, right? And so it's kind of hard to turn down, you taking care of my family, a better quality of life, a better education for my kids, that's just kind of hard to do in that capacity. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was a lot of it. And then we just did not appreciate it. As a city, the powers that be did not appreciate it. There were not enough policies to protect it. There were not enough things in place financially to protect those creators, and I think people just kind of got burned out.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, I think people don't, like, I guess, oftentimes realize how integrated politics has always been with music in general, But even, like, especially hip-hop, I mean, the roots of hip-hop were always in some kind of a political statement. And oftentimes, I feel like New Orleans has had much less of it as an overt. I mean, I think, folks like Mac rapping about what his life was like at the time was very political.
Yep.
Right?
Shout out to Mac. That's important.
The irony of, like, of the gangster rap genre was that, like, that was a racist term that was used to marginalize NWA.
Yep.
NWA was an explicitly, overtly political thing. You know, like what they were talking about was it wasn't glamorous, right?
Nope.
When you first heard it,
in
it
your
wasn't.
face.
And, it was
buck
bad.
the system.
Right. Yeah. And it was like, we're doing this because this is the life we have.
Yep.
But today we have a lot of folks that talk about it a little bit, but like I'd say right now, other than like Flagboy Giz, who else are like the Rakims, right, of New Orleans right now, of this generation of hip hop?
Man, I think there's a lot. And I think the beauty of New Orleans is that, like, much like New Orleans food, much like New Orleans, like, fashion, anything New Orleans, right? We are not just like this one monolith, right? There's there's a great person or a great thing for every little subgenre, every little sub thing. So like, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of leaders. I mean, I'm biased just because I'm in a collective with a bunch of them that do a lot of dope work. But I mean, I think that there are a lot of people that are doing a lot of cool work, and that I think that are stepping out of the bounds of what New Orleans is typically.
Yes.
Because that's kind of what our thing is. That's kind of what we kind of pride ourselves on, is like global warming. We don't want to be, typical New Orleans. We don't want to be typical what people think when they see or think cookie cutter New Orleans. You're right. Right. So we want you to know that pop comes from here. Black grunge comes from here. Black joy, upbeat hip hop comes from here. Right. I mean, and it's not a knock on any of the other genres that people do think about when they come from here, but we're so much more than that. So it's like, I just kind of got tired of folks not seeing we were more than that. And to be honest, I mean, touring the world with Tank and the Bangers and seeing them work every night and bring that uniqueness to all these different places around the world, and seeing how people reacted to it, and seeing how people, saying how it saved their life, or seeing how people saying how seeing Tank live her truth on stage authentically made them live their truth. Seeing now Grammy-winning artists come up to us after shows and being like, you inspired me to do this, or your Tiny Desk. So like all of that was just like, okay, like we have something here. We just haven't had a person or a thing or entity to move it forward collectively. So like, but yeah, man. I mean, I think a lot of them. That's I don't know if I can name any names, man, because everybody's dope. Everybody's dope in their own way, man. I shout out to I also think too, like a lot of the queer community have been stepping up, and that community obviously has been very, very, very big in the bounce community. But I'm loving to see that community rise in the DJ community, in the R&B, hip hop. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's another big thing that's changed, because our city was very closed-minded to a lot of that stuff if it wasn't bounce. So it's also beautiful to see that expand. Frida's new album is a gospel album.
Yeah.
That within
great
itself,
album too.
And it's a great album. That within itself is the personification of doing something different. Frida was on tour with us when she had the idea for this 5 or 6 years ago. So it's beautiful to see it like manifest into the actual thing. So.
It's funny you said that, because I have a friend of mine who once told me this story about, he was hanging around with Fifth Ward Weeby, and they were at some show he was doing one night, and I think, I want to say Katie Red was opening, was headlining the show, right? And it was here in town,
Makes sense.
And
Makes sense.
One of his boys looked at him and was like, "Yo, man, why are you on this bill with this, F word, and like, what's up with that? Like all this, He's like, this is some sissy nonsense, right?" Yeah. And Weeby was just like, "Bro, look at there." He's like, "You see all the masses out there shaking?" He was like, "I don't care who it is. I don't care what he's into, what she's into. Does not matter. Like if they want to come and dance and have a party, then I'm down for it."
Listen.
And I was like, and when my friend told me that, this is like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago when he told me this, and this was right around the time when oh God, I can't remember his name. There was a rapper who'd kind of come out, and people were all like, on one level, we're like, oh, we're all very supportive, but then his record sales like dropped, and like he was getting dropped from tours, and like, and I really realized this was an area that like hip hop had been really retrograde and really, really, really bad about.
Yep.
But in New Orleans, the bounce scene, it was kind of like much better. So
yeah. I mean, I grew up as a straight male, being invited by my friends from that community to come to the clubs. That they were like, shout out to Club Switch right now. That's a space that is open, and there's been events that have been happening that have been bringing communities together safely. So I think that's important, having boundaries and having events that have certain intentions. But it is up to us to be leaders in that area. We've been leaders in that area in a lot of different spaces. So I think I think we've been leaders in that area. People have looked to New Orleans to see how that's happening. So yes, things are changing. It's not perfect. We're not where we need to be. Like there's still some stuff, but we've come a ways, I think, from that 10 years.
Like Sleazy Easy out there, and like
listen,
that's they're amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, doing it, and then just being allowed to be an artist and not feeling like they have to do or talk about a certain thing to be New Orleans enough.
Right. which is also, frankly, a political statement on y'all's part, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to just try to do the, to fit in the box, even if we're going to try to make the box bigger or change the shape of it. We're just going to ignore the box altogether.
The box is, is likened to capitalism, so we bust out of that.
Well, to take it out of that box altogether, let's talk about a little bit about Notre Dame.
Yeah.
For folks that don't know who it is, explain what the group does.
Yeah, so the nonprofit that I work with full time is Our Voice Nuestra Voz. That is a nonprofit here that works on Black and Brown solidarity building. They've been around for almost 10 years now. I've been on the team for about 3 years. I'm the outreach coordinator and manager, and so really what I do is really just try to center, what we're doing in programming and reach out to different folks and build coalition. Even before what we see is happening in our country now, we know the importance of why, Black and Brown communities need to be on the same page with a lot of different things, and also just kind of be in community and in space with each other. I think that there's a lot of like rhetoric and there's a lot of misinformation that have intentionally kept those communities away from each other. And even now, there's a lot of rhetoric behind who should be fighting the fight and should Black people be involved. And, this isn't our fight. This isn't our business, but we like to center also on ancestry too. And so because what the truth of the matter is, and we know this too in New Orleans, is we're not a monolith. We have people and we have communities of people that are a part of both of those communities, and a lot more than we know here in this region, in this city. And so a lot of what we do is really just, try to build community, try to offer, resources. We just did a program called Fuerza Juvenil for the youth, for some brown youth that are in all these parish schools, and teaching them how to do networking, scholarship, just things that, a lot of kids from those communities are just not taught. A lot of those kids say that, either they learn from their elders or it's just culturally acceptable for them to just kind of move throughout life and through society, being as quiet as they can be and not being seen and, kind of flying under the radar intentionally, so they don't shake up the bottle or so they don't cause too much attention and something happens or they're shipped out of here, right? And so we just want to give them the tools to empower themselves, know their history, figure out their stories. We have one who was a senior who's leaving and got some money to go to school, and so I'm just encouraged to hear about stuff like that. But yeah, man, it's really, we embrace so many different things. We took a group of Black leaders of organizations here in the city to the San Diego-Tijuana border about 2 years ago. So that was powerful for them to see and feel the experience of migrants. Like they actually walked across the border. They did like a day trek. And so, we filmed a documentary that'll be coming out soon that talks about that. So yeah, at the heart of it though, we really just want to help those communities build. And we also leave space to hear from community and see what are y'all going through, what's going on. Obviously, we operate in the schools pretty heavy. Right now, we're doing a lot of PDs, with a lot of the schools, teaching the staff and the preps about know your rights and how they can protect the kids, how they can protect their staff. And so, yeah, man, we like to be responsive to the times as well. I think it's important that we hold space. Programming's good and having a schedule is good, but I think it's also even important and more community oriented to just also hold space to be reactionary to what you hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll be honest, like when Trump was talking about black jobs, right, I assumed that like everybody would hear that as a racist trope.
Yeah.
But it turns out that a fair number of black people didn't hear that. They heard that, oh yeah, these people are actually coming for your jobs, or at the very minimum, this ain't your fight. Why you won't even think about that? Right?
Yeah, very strategic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it worked, and that's kind of surprising. So y'all's work is very important right now.
Yeah.
In this, especially in this time.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we have been tricked. A lot of people have been tricked to feel as though we don't share a common barrier. And oftentimes the barrier is big and long, and it looks different along different points of it, but it's the same barrier. So it's just it's up to us to come together and like build up on each other, and literally like the meme that I see where people stand on each other to look over the wall. Like it's up to us to like stand on each other's shoulders. Up to us to build coalition and figure out like how to get over this. I'm a history buff too, and so historically, like people have come together and made change. There are countless times over countless regions that people have come together and pushed forth change when different groups of people have come together and just really had a common goal. And so I'm always encouraged by, it's happened before. We're not doing some uncharted stuff. We just got to break through the noise, break through the intentional distractions, and make it happen,
Well, before we wrap up here, I have two questions. One is kind of not a great positive one, but in the United States in general, we've seen over the last 10 years the rise of this sort of like weird, very like toxic masculine influencer type situation. Yeah. I think like online, people call it like, like it's just like these dudes like that weird pedophile who was in Romania that they brought back recently. Right now, all these like little kids are running around acting like that guy.
I saw that.
What is you're working with like a lot of younger people just in all your jobs.
Definitely.
Is that happening? Are we seeing the effects here in New Orleans of that? And what is there anything we can do just for our community to try to combat that? Are you guys doing anything like to try to combat that specifically? Or?
You know what, man? What I have noticed, shout out to LCCR, Louisiana Children's Rights, right? I saw a stat that only 2% of like New Orleans kids were in and out of the penal system. Where I think I forget who it was, but somebody, that obviously had other interests shared a graph that was like 40%. But so first of all, that just leads to me saying that like the youth that I come in contact with, the youth that I meet, all of us have our own stuff that we're going through, right? And these kids are going through some heavy stuff. First of all, I mean, I can't even imagine being a Katrina baby. Most of these kids, that I'm working with have gone through Katrina. They've gone through Ida. They've gone through 2 Trump presidencies, but the pandemic, and they were babies when Obama was around, and so they kind of got. So I don't know. It's a very unique time for them. I mean, obviously my time we saw a lot of crazy stuff between Bush and Clinton, right, and Reagan, and my kid time, right. But yeah, I don't know. I think that these kids are dope, man. Like I am super inspired by them, and I think that we just have to do a better job of listening to them. Like I think that yes, there's stuff that's going on here. Yes, there's issues that get heightened and put on the screen in front of our kids, and of course, but violent crime is down, I heard, right? Carjacking is down. Juvenile offenders are down. This is not saying that we're done and our work is done and we're good. Pat yourself on the back. It's like, but it is saying stuff is getting better there. So let's lean into what's working. And I think what's working is just a lot of youth developed programs, a lot of organizations that are starting to center the youth in a real way. Like shout out to like NOYA, one of our part, like the New Orleans Youth Alliance. Like they do real work with the youth, and the youth are at the table to help develop some of this stuff. So it's not really us telling these people who are 20 years removed from us what they should be doing, how they should be thinking. Because let's just be real, the world is a lot different. When I was 18, we were just entering the AOL free disc era, right? Where you collect all those 50 hours of AOL. I had a box of them, right? But like the kids now, they're beckoning, like it's at their hands. The internet is right there. My 12-year-old son can look up anything he wants to. We have parental restrictions, right? But still, the reality of he can look up anything he wants to right there and there, right? And so, yeah, I think it's just up to us to really like use that to our advantage too. I think but yeah, these youth are great, man. We just gotta listen to them. Yeah, listen to them, support them, give them what they need. Let's have programs. When I was younger, there were so many free youth programs that just don't exist anymore, right? Shout out to, there was a program that NORD did back then called World of Work. Wow. World of Work. World of Work I went to for like 2 or 3 years. And World of Work essentially would just put you in a new job every week. So I went from being a hospital administrator. I followed a hospital administrator, an auctioneer. I followed a principal. I followed a veterinary, shout out to Mr. Darryl Reeves because he ran a studio at the time. And so that was one of my inspirations for getting in the music industry. So like just programming like that was free. That was important for me back then. This is the 90s. I'm from Uptown off of Valence and Magnolia, which was not one of the safest areas at that time. And my mom was a single parent. And so, stuff like that helped me, saved me, kept me on the beaten path.
Yeah,
You know,
this is a history of these programs that we always forget. You know, like I came up in the DC area, and you know, Marion Barry's summer youth program. Like I have friends of mine that would have been dead.
Listen,
if they had not been for that, right?
Listen,
and people complained, and they were like, "Oh, you know, they're giving 16-year-old kids jobs to basically be a secretary where there's like 15 of them in an office or something like that." And it's like, okay, well maybe that was going on, but instead of being like out in the street doing dirt or being around people doing dirt or being shot by somebody while they're just minding their own business because the other guy was doing dirt, they were sitting in an office getting paid to sit there, and they had a little bit of money in their pocket, and they realized that working a job was not like the worst thing in the world. Which, when you're 16, it feels like it's going to be.
And
the
it
worst thing in the
trains you to be in that position, right? Then you're like, oh, okay, well, this isn't what people told me it was, right? It wasn't. Yeah, another to your point, the Calio projects. Now they've changed to the CJ Pete, right? But they would have a midnight basketball league. When I was coming up, there was and when I say, I'm talking about 300 or 400 people in the stands watching a game that starts at midnight. I think this was, don't quote me on this, I'm pretty sure this was like Chief Pennington. I think this was either Pennington. But yeah, I remember him starting that, and crime went down so much because I think stuff was happening between 12 and 4 in the morning. And crime went down so much when that happened. Community spirits went up, community pride, just living around in that time. And we knew that we were going to go play the 7th Ward, Hardin Park next week, and we're going to go play Mid-City. You know, it's like that was kind of dope to see the community come together. People made shirts and stuff like that, right? So yeah, I think stuff like that was important. Like I'm sure that the reason that it didn't happen anymore was like the changing of like, a new term, a new people who want to have their new programming. But like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't matter who started it.
You got to make sure you pay them when they come to the job, which we've had problems with recently. Before we get out of here, last thing I want to ask you is are there give me like one or two young artists that are coming up right now. Yeah. If they're within global warming or even without, doesn't matter. Just like that you're looking at and you're like, yo, these are going to be names to know. Yeah,
man. Ooh, man. Everybody's so dope. So I would say, first of all, Lareezy, definitely got to see brother Lareezy grow immensely, right? He has a new project coming up with PJ. We were just talking about that. Literally just talked about how like Grammy-winning Maroon 5 member PJ still comes home to find out who's popping, and now he's producing a project.
Oh, he's producing it. Okay, well,
he's producing this project.
Lareezy's really, really good.
Super dope. Yeah. So yeah, they have a new song out, but so Lareezy's awesome. Nas Got Next is another one. Nas came through the Trump on Shorty program and has taken off since then. But yeah, Nas, N-A-Z, Nas Got Next. He just put a new video out, but he's doing some phenomenal things. Straight New Orleans, giving kind of like a rapper, singer, but straight from the heart vibes, like a super authentic kid. So I think he's got some real cool things coming up. Jade Centrell is another singer. She's amazing. Jade does everything from classical to R&B to country to gospel, plays all these different instruments. And so that's another one. That's another one who's been putting the work in. I've seen like her stages get bigger and grow phenomenally. So like, yeah, man, I think and there's tons more, man. Those are just the three like really young ones that I've had the pleasure of working with and see grow. And I'm just excited to like really see them take it to the next level. But like, yeah, man, I mean, we have so much finance, so much talent here, and even beyond the artists, right? I mean, we're starting to get looked at by designers. Shout out to like the design and the fashion side of the city, right? Because I mean, I was traveling out of the country and people were talking about designers from right here in New Orleans, so I think that, it's just, it's time for all of us to really just put our heads together. And that was what Global Warming was for. We wanted to have an entity where everybody can come to the table, not just the musicians, not just the rappers, not just the producers. Like everybody can come to the table in some kind of way. Shout out to the DJs. I feel like the DJ. Because some of my best friends and mentors were DJs. I always thought the DJ community here was not respected and taken.
No, it's not. Never
serious. I've lived in other places, gone to other DJ sets, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I appreciate what we have once I leave and go to other parties, right? And so like it's good to see the DJ community grow and expand and have more events and venues. I mean, in my day, there were a lot of venues who didn't want to do DJ parties. They thought that was a waste of time. And so now to see that become a thing, to see the DJs become curators and have their own events and stuff, it's dope. It's dope to see, man. So like, I just think we're at a time where we just got to build on, and then that's what we've been trying to do.
All right. Well, appreciate you coming in, man. This has been really great.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for what y'all do, man. Thank you. Yeah.